Welcome to the Moulding Private Practice Show, where we help healthcare practitioners in private practice keep true to their purpose and build a life of mastery by providing the knowledge, skills, and tools to bring their dreams to life. In this episode of the show, we speak to Jeanie Cave about being a clinical psychologist and everything private practice management related. Jeanie Cave, welcome to the show. So we're really, really glad to have you on board. And I'm quite excited about this one because, we've worked with you, for the last few years. And I think your private practice setup is quite unique. And I don't mean unique as in no one else has it, but I've actually enjoyed the interaction. So I'd love to go into that. Welcome on board.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you, Shaz. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me, even after all the grey hairs that I've given you guys, of being maybe one of your more difficult clients to have. But it's really lovely to be here and really appreciate all the work you guys do for us.
No, I always say it. The pleasure is all ours. I think having clients like yourself, helps us to grow and to learn. And I've said it on previous episodes, but we spoke about that authentic person, self. And for us, it's always about that. It's that honesty. And we can only do what we can do. We learn a lot of things. We do lots of stupid things most of the time, but we do learn and we get better, and we hopefully don't do the same things again. But just to kick it off, just to give everyone a sense of how we know Jeanie, and how you got her to be on the show.
So look, like you said, Jeanie's been a client of ours for quite a while now, both on the managed service and then in the software. But more than anything, I actually invited Jeanie onto the show after reading a Facebook post about her Fair Lady article on hypnotherapy, and invited her then to do an episode with us on hypnotherapy and an episode with us on just what it is to be a clinical psychologist in private practice. And she was quite keen to come on board and share her knowledge.
Thanks for doing that. And I think, Jeanie, we're going to unpack that. But, I think with this conversation, we can go in so many different directions. But where I want to start off with is, so the purpose is for anyone deciding they actually want to become a clinical psychologist, how would they do that? What do they need to look out for? And then the other part, which is how do you try migrate into a private practice, because that's normally a big step. And I think why I'm looking forward to this is you do so much of work around mentoring of other practitioners that so just sharing that knowledge, sharing that wisdom with us. But I always ask this with every single practitioner on the show, but they always ask you when you're growing up, and it's normally like before you grade 3 or standard 1 most of the time. So what are you going to do when you grow up? So did a young Jeanie Cave say she wanted to become a clinical psychologist?
Well, a very young Jeanie Cave actually said that she wanted to be a trapeze artist. That was always what I wanted to do after seeing the Boswell Wilkie Circus. That was my dream. But I'd say I developed an interest in psychology around grade 8 when I picked up a book that my father had on Freud. And I thought that was quite interesting and sounded very interesting. But when I was in grade 10, I had a very difficult year in which my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer and my sister died of leukemia in the same year. And also had a friend who died in a car accident and a friend that committed suicide all in the same year. And my parents took me to see a psychologist, and my parents also saw the same psychologist, and we saw him each separately. And he really helped us. He really helped us through that year. And I don't know if we would have survived emotionally if it wasn't for the benefit of seeing this therapist. And it was after that I decided that I wanted to be a psychologist. The next year I did my work experience with this particular psychologist. And then when I was in matric, in 2001, and 9/11 happened just before, the day before my science final. And the year after, I was planning on actually traveling and going overseas and taking a gap year. And then my parents thought it was going to be World War III. So they said, you can't go overseas next year. You must either work or study. So I decided to study, of course, rather live the student life. And the only thing that I could still really get into, because I was also thinking about medicine, I was thinking about law, the only thing I could still get into at that stage was psychology, because you didn't have to apply, you just had to have the right amount of points. And in my first psychology lecture, there were 1,500 people. And in my first psychology lecture, the lecturer said, of the 1,500 of you, maybe one of you will actually become a psychologist. And for me, then it was game on, because I used to be highly competitive. I think I've worked on that through the years. And so I was then highly motivated to become this one out of the group that would become, because it's a very long degree that you'll be selected for. Of how I became a psychologist growing up.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah, and did you find, I mean, so obviously with psychologists, we always have to explain this, for anyone that doesn't know, but so getting your undergraduate, so I mean, that's, as you said, is quite the easy part. It's similar to commerce, like there's like a gazillion number of people, in commerce classes, but the ones that actually get to honors level and in master's level is, I mean, that's where the numbers dwindle. Did you find that that was quite an easy progression?
No, it was very traumatic and very difficult. So back in my day, I mean, my bachelor's degree is from Rao, so that tells you how old I am. So we were the last group to graduate from Rao. All you needed was 65% to get into honors, and you were automatically accepted for honors. That has now changed, and there's a selection process for honors as well,
Oh, wow.
which I think is pros and cons, because if you don't get selected for honors, you can not waste your time doing honors, you can go do something else. But if you get selected for honors, you don't get selected for masters, then that's very difficult. So the masters, there's like 700 to 1,000 paper applications per university, and they take 7 to 12 people. And it is very, very subjective. It is very, very unclear what they're looking for. It is not only about marks. It's also fit with their paradigm. It's looking at the fit of the group, and it's looking at your suitability to train as a psychologist. And it is a very difficult and very emotionally challenging process, the selection process. The selections themselves are hard, and the rejection is hard. In fact, just this weekend, I did a master's preparation session with a wonderful organization, Cognition & Co. I don't know if you're aware of Cognition & Co. There is a Psychology Students Association, and Dylan Benyon is the founder. And through his own journey, he was actually selected for this year's master's in counseling psychology at University of Pretoria. But through all the previous years of struggling to get into masters, he started this organization, this student association, helping and guiding people in their journey to become psychologists, the different routes, the different degrees, and the different universities, what's required. And he does beautiful work in preparing people for the master's selections. So that was very difficult. I was rejected by my first 3 universities, and I had accepted that I was not going to become a psychologist by the time I interviewed at UNISA, which is not a distance learning university for masters in clinical psychology. We went into the campus every day for 2 years instead of 1 year. I'd already accepted that it wasn't going to happen, and I started actually looking at job opportunities. And then I'm fortunate to be selected. And I say fortunate not to be modest, but because it really is a lottery, okay? It really has got very minimally to do with your value, and it's got to do with this incredible lottery of all these people applying and what the selectors are looking for on a particular day, and what they manage to gain from getting to know you in a very short amount of time. So I was very lucky to be selected. And then from then, it's just really been the most incredible fit. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. I did my internship the year after, my ComServe the year after that. So it has been a year-by-year progression. I didn't have big gaps in my journey. I qualified as an independent practitioner when I was 27. So that was quite young. I started my private practice when I was 27, which was quite young. I used to tell my clients that I was 30 because they used to ask me all the time, and I thought that 30 sounded quite old. Nobody asks me that anymore. I've been in private practice for 11 years now. At the end of this year will be 12 years. And yeah, then it was a pretty smooth progression, and I never looked back. It is incredibly suited to me. I really love my work. I feel incredibly lucky to be able to do it. It's a privilege. It's interesting. I find that you can have a lucrative career. So in that sense, it was easy, but the master's selection was a very difficult process.
Yeah, and that can't be good for your confidence, eh? Like, like
No.
getting rejected, especially if you sail through all the way to honors and you got like amazing results and you think you're just going to get into the master's program and you don't. And,
It is good, but it is good. That rejection, I'll tell you what it is good for. It is good for training you as a psychologist to not need the approval of the environment. So that rejection helps you detach yourself as a psychologist, because you cannot be people-pleasing in your work. You sometimes have to be very difficult in your interactions with your clients to not reinforce their ineffective relational patterns. You have to be able to have difficult conversations. You have to be able to tolerate people not liking you in order to be a psychologist. So in that rejection process, it was actually very helpful, because it helps you detached from a need for approval from the environment. So not good for your confidence. You do feel unworthy, but it is part of a process in teaching you to not need validation from the environment in order to continue doing what it is that you're doing.
Now, I love that you say that, the rejection in its own way is actually a good thing because it helps to build you.
Yes.
So based on what you said earlier, you basically went straight into private practice after doing your internship in ComServe. What were some of the challenges that you faced, going from doing internship in ComServe and now having to run a business? What was something that you wish you could turn around now and say to your younger self, listen, Jeanie, you need to know A, B, and C?
Working at a step-down facility doing neuropsychological rehab, and I was working there half day and trying to run a private practice half day. So the first thing I would say is he who chases two rabbits catches none. So if you can afford to, take some time off. So in your internship, in your ComServe, save as much money as you can. Save as much money as you can so that you can cover 6 months of your expenses in private practice so that you don't have to work another job. Because my private practice really flourished when I focused on my private practice. My ex, he pointed out to me, he was very, very good with money and business. And he said to me, for every hour in private, for your whole day at the clinic is the same as what you are earning in private practice. So instead of spending the day there, rather spend that time getting one client. Rather invest that time, that entire day. If you get one client from that entire day, you've actually covered 4 days per month of working there at that clinic. So he showed me about being money smart. So I think that going back to my younger self would be, he who chases two rabbits catches none, and being money smart. Psychologists have terrible money mentality. I don't know what it is. Psychologists all believe that they are poor even though they earn very well. They all believe they have no money. They all believe that they can't take time off because they're not going to have enough money. They all believe that they aren't allowed to charge what they want to charge. They all believe that they don't deserve to get the money that they get. And when I say all, I mean the majority. And so the psychologists that I work with in mentoring, especially private practice, is to work on your money mentality and start to look at how money works. We get into this career because we don't want to be in finance, okay? So we don't know how money works and we don't get trained to know how money works. Do a business course, understand how money works, get yourself a good business coach, get yourself a mentor, which I was very lucky to have from the beginning. I had Charles Forster, who was my therapy mentor and my therapy supervisor, and invest in yourself. You've got to spend money to make money. Pay for the courses, pay for the supervision, pay for the professional companies like SME Metrics to do the billing, to run your practice for you. Pay somebody to do your Google AdWords for you. You've got to spend money to make money. If you're going to have a professional business, you have to run it in a professional way and understand how money works. Understand also that it's about you. You are your product. So you have to invest in yourself. You have to put yourself out there and you have to make yourself visible to your community through networking with other professionals, through networking with doctors, through Google AdWords, making yourself visible through Google AdWords, doing podcasts, putting yourself out there and developing your professional identity from an early stage so that people feel like they're having a relationship with you even before they come to you. They'll come to see you because they already have a relationship with you because you've made yourself visible.
So I actually remember that story. We were at at our offices, and you told me that story about the balance of the time, and and I thought that was amazing. When I heard you say that, because I thought, and it's actually well done to you because you took that on and you kind of ran with it, and obviously made it a success and a whole methodology. And I loved everything you said because I think just that part is, it kind of is the best part about what we've done so far in this episode. And I think it's amazing advice. But I do want to talk about the impact therapy setup because I think you do it in a certain unique way, which I haven't found many people do. And the reason I say that is I think there's not enough mentorship, in the industry and, mentorship around private practice. And so maybe take us through that. How does impact therapy actually, how is it set up? I know you have some key staff, like Privy, right-hand person, but tell us how that works, just behind the curtain, how do you work with the mentorship and stuff like that?
Okay, so I've got associates in the practice who are all psychologists, counseling, clinical, and educational psychologists. And I started the center because it was actually also a necessity is the mother of invention. So in 2018, the place where I was renting a room, I was just renting a room. There were a number of psychologists, but we worked independently. It closed down. The building was sold to an investor, and they were changing the whole thing. So we had to find new rooms. And then I went to a medical center, and I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't enjoy the clinical smell. I didn't enjoy the actual physical room, and I didn't enjoy the clinical medical vibe to it. But this particular one. And then I thought to myself, I went and I had a look at some other places, and I looked in terms of the rent that I was paying at this place for absolutely nothing. I could rent an entire house for the same amount of money and rent the rooms out to other practitioners. And I worked, and it's been a very long process, and I've got an incredible business coach who's helped me to, as you guys know, as you've been working with me through the years, is the business has grown, and I've learned a lot about business from having it, and it has evolved and it has changed. And I started off thinking I'm just going to rent the rooms to other practitioners, and like all psychologists dream of, make passive income. But let me tell you something, when you're a psychologist, there is no such thing as passive income. The best thing you can do when you're selling your time is not to think about somebody else selling their time on your behalf. The best thing you can do when you're selling your time is to maximize the rand value that you're selling that time for. That is the best thing you can do when you're selling your time. Because let me tell you, I've worked harder in the center than I've ever worked on anything in my entire life. And I think that's because as a therapist, I'm a therapist in my being. It's what I love to do. It's how I engage with people in my life. I'm not everybody's therapist, but I try my best to live as a therapist and embody the principles of a therapist in my interactions with all people in my life. But with my associates, I realized that in order for them to be successful, I had to invest a lot of my time in mentoring and coaching and guiding them on how to be effective in private practice. Most associates that join the practice usually come from government service, and being in government service is a completely different profession to being in private practice. The nature of the beast is completely different, and there is a big mind shift and a big relational dynamic shift that needs to take place between the therapist and the client from government service into private practice. And so I had to spend a lot of time with my clinicians in giving them the best chance for success, because if they are not successful, the center cannot be successful. And also, I can't help myself. I just love it. I love spending time with them. I love mentoring them. I love sharing with them what I've learned. I love facilitating training. A big part of my work is also doing CPD training. So I have my private clients I see. I have the center. I have the CPD training, and I'm busy with a PhD. So those are the facets of my professional life. But I really love working with my associates and watching them grow. And I love empowering them to be effective therapists, just like I love working with my clients for them to become empowered to be effective people in and of themselves. And it's their success. I kind of think of it sometimes like being the conductor of an orchestra. I'm not actually playing any music myself, but my power lies in mobilizing other people's power. And my success and my satisfaction comes from watching them have success and satisfaction in their lives. And so it's just actually an extension of the therapeutic work that I do in how I view running the center with my associates.
Again, I mean, like, I love your stories and how you put across the ideas, but I love that. And I think, if you look at it from a business point of view, that's why McDonald's does things in a certain way. When you walk into, whether it's a McDonald's here or one in Neisner, it has the same look. It has that, even the, the smell of the place, with the really, really good, like businesses, even the sound of the music in the background all gives you that sense of whether you want to be in that space or not. And I think that's something that, anyone that has a private practice should put a lot of effort in terms of. I remember we started, I would say, experimenting. When Spotify kind of came out, we came up with this playlist, and we would put the music on, and there were so many people that commented on the choice of music on the playlist, and it's like stuff like that people almost expect when they come into the place what that would be. So I like that.
Exactly.
That you do
About your branding. And I think
Mm.
maybe if I can add to what we were saying earlier, well, I think it is an extension or punctuation of what we were saying earlier about your identity and your branding and making yourself visible and having that professional identity and having that branding where it isn't just standard, but there is a standard. and that you have a certain quality and there's a certain branding and a certain a level of expectation of quality of service that you are providing with your client, that they know what to expect from you as a brand.
I love that you actually put it that way, Jeanie, because that's exactly what it is. There's nothing worse than when you go to a medical center and there's 6 practitioners and all 6 of them are using a different billing software and a different credit card machine and a different booking system, and nothing kind of fits cohesively. So it just feels very disjointed. But when you walk into a center where there's one central, everything kind of fits in together, there is that feeling of this is what I'm going to expect. And it doesn't matter whether I'm seeing therapist A or therapist B, there's that standard, there's that feel behind the center. It's the reason places like MediClinic grew the way they did, because one MediClinic looked exactly like the next, looked exactly like the next. So how do you manage that within your center from, we'll start with the basics, from just that reception type instance all the way through to making sure that everybody's invoicing kind of follows that same professional pattern?
So it's so interesting that you say that, because when I first took associates before I started the center, when I was subletting my room thinking that that was the same thing at the previous place where I was, it was called Jeanie Cave and Associates, and that didn't work, because then when you see one of the other people, you feel like you're seeing a substandard, you're not seeing the main person. And I had the best experience today. I received an email from somebody that says, "Hi, I believe that you are also at Impact Therapy Center." And they actually recognized the center before they recognized me. And that was such an awesome moment, because that was my dream, was for the center to have an identity of its own and to have a reputation of its own. And then to come to your question of how do you have that standard, I think it is very much like having a trusted partner like SME Metrics, where there is one platform for everybody to use at the same time, and there is some synchronicity and there's some organization. You have to be incredibly organized, and you have to have systems in place that work. And everybody has to be able to use the system, understand the system, and the system cannot have problems in it. And whenever I've changed the model of the center, whether I've changed the way that we've done something or changed a service provider, it's been because there was something that wasn't working and in the system, and I needed the system to function better. One of my very first associates, when I showed them this is how we're going to do things, this is how we're going to build, this is how we're going to keep track of everything, he said to me, "Wow." And I had like a whole welcome pack. These are the ICD-10 codes, this is how you do this is our procedure for this is that. Even when I hired Privy, who's also been with me almost since the beginning, she's got a manual of when a client calls. It's actually a decision tree, that she doesn't need the decision tree anymore. But when a client calls, there are certain questions that she asks, and she follows that decision tree to know which therapist to book the client with. And so you have to have systems in place, and the systems have got to work. Or else, like you say, you go to a center where everybody's doing their own thing. You feel like everybody's just renting a room in the center, and they're just a lodger. They don't feel like an owner. And one of the things that I really want clients to experience, because it is actually the truth, is that all my practitioners are also owners. They take ownership because they have an identity with the center, and we are a family, we're a team. It's not just people renting rooms. We're a family, we're a team, and there is an identity that we have as a center that all the practitioners are also owners.
I think with that as well, I mean, it gives you that certain level of satisfaction. So I'm sure that's what your associates kind of, see as well. It's that shared goal, that shared vision of where where you all agree that it should be and what you want out of it. And I completely agree. I think we had, in one of our earlier shows, when we started one of our early episodes when we started the show was Ilse Alberts, and she shares very similar thought pattern, with yourself, very driven, like exactly what you said about, maximizing your time and the, she doesn't do CPD courses, but definitely courses, online courses. And she said something, she had a center in Santon, Bryanston, I think it was Bella Vida, and she said something similar, like it was like landlord tenant, and she hated the fact that, like the toilets were broken, she couldn't be in that hat, And so I really like the impact therapy model. I think you've done amazingly well from what we see on the outside. Obviously, we don't see, but how people speak about it. If you look at your online presence, everything kind of works. So well done for that. I think it works really well. I do want to ask as well, and this is almost like something selfish, which we don't normally do, but is you because like we were. I mean, you were a client and then you moved away to another system, and we don't have to name what the system is, but then you came back. Was there certain reasons for that? I mean, I would love to know, we've never asked about that in detail, but is there, because, like from a billing software point of view, it's difficult always to please everyone. And as a rule, and I think, you probably identify with this, the only reason we even created SME metrics initially was because my wife, who's a clin psych as well, she just struggled with billing. It was just, I couldn't find anything in the market, that we could do. And so we started on that trajectory. But over time, what I found was, people leave and they come back, and you probably find this in your practice as well. And people choose it for different reasons. I would love to hear your thoughts around that.
Okay, so I said the other day to my therapist, I don't often make bad decisions, but when I do, I always back it up with another one immediately. And the bad decision that I initially made was making Privy responsible for both submitting and managing the billing and reception services. And why did I do it? Because I didn't want to spend money. Okay, so like I said, you've got to spend money to make money. And we had a huge billing crisis where we had hundreds of thousands of rands that were unpaid. And I problem solved that by outsourcing a bookkeeper to manage the billing. Let Privy focus on what she's good at, which is the reception. She's not a trained bookkeeper, and I didn't realize how much work it was. And Privy, who's incredibly helpful and hardworking, also never said to me, I'm not coping. And the psychologists who've got bad money mentality weren't keeping track of their money, neither was I. And then suddenly everyone was like, well, where's our cash flow? And took a deep dive and saw that there was hundreds of thousands of rands that had not been paid to practitioners. And so I panicked. The one good decision I made was to get a professional bookkeeper to do it. But the bad decision I made, so the first bad decision was making Privy do 2 jobs instead of paying 2 people to do 1 job. Okay. Then to do 2 jobs. Then the second bad decision, I was going away from SME metrics to a package that looked fancier because it was 3 times the price. Mm-hmm. Okay, and they promised us the moon, and they told us it's going to be so much easier to keep track of money, where it actually wasn't the SME metrics side of things that made it hard to keep track of money. It was that Privy is not a bookkeeper. Okay, so it wasn't a system issue on the software, it was a process issue within the center, within the business. And I didn't know that at the time. And then the software that we went to, it wasn't because it was 3 times the price that we came back. It was because it was shit. Sorry, it was bad. It was crap. It wasn't good. Okay. Clients were not getting their appointment reminders. Clients were not getting their invoices. And whenever I spoke to them, they were so incredibly unhelpful. Now, it cost me a lot of money to get all of our practitioners loaded on there. It cost me nearly 10,000 Rand just to get the practitioners loaded. Now, every month was 3 times the price of SME metrics. And the service was absolutely horrendous. There was no support, and they just kept blame shifting. And also, it didn't sync with Google Calendar. So the appointments weren't appearing in my Google Calendar, and they weren't appearing in the client's Google Calendar. And we had so many no-shows. And it's a very difficult thing managing late cancellation billing for clients. I insist that we do it because it's a boundary issue, but we can talk about that another time. But now all these clients have missed their appointment. They're disappointed because they've missed out on their session. And they said, but it didn't come up into my calendar, which I think your guys' software just works so technically well. So I spoke to my accountant because they sold the other package to us that it was so much better on the accounting side. And that was our problem at the time. We had no problems with SME metrics. The problem was that we had a large amount of unpaids. And I didn't at the time know that it wasn't a problem with the software. So they promised me that it was a much better accounting system, that my accountant, our bookkeeper that I was employing, was going to be able to keep track of the funds much better. And when we experienced all these other problems with them, I spoke to our bookkeeper and I said, is this product much better than SME metrics? And she said, not at all. And so then the only thing was a little bit of eating humble pie and asking you guys, please, will you take me back? It's like, asking an ex, please, will you take me back after you've broken up with them? And I was hoping you would. That was the only thing that was a question mark for me was, and then also the cost I had to pay a large amounts of money to get our data from that system. And they wouldn't release our data without paying a large amount of money, even though we'd been with them for less than 3 months. And we'd already paid a whole lot of money to get onto that system. So it was a purely business decision to leave. It wasn't the right business decision, and it was a purely business decision to come back. And all of our clients have been saying to us, oh, we're so happy that you're back with SME Metrics, because it's a much better system.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Hey, you mentioned so many things there that I love. I mean, one was the price point, and when we started, you won't believe this, but like I first started, like we obviously need to get the thing rolling. So we started with like $50 a month or something. And I promise you, no one bought it. And when I changed it to like 350 rands, and I tell everyone that that tells us, but your subscription is high or something like that. And I always tell them that that idea that when we started and it was low, people never bought. But when I almost like made it more palatable, 350, obviously it's higher now. But people bought, and I can there's something about that. Apple gets this 100% right. There's something about that pricing and value. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. The other thing that I find almost ludicrous, because lots of providers seem to do this for some reason, but they hold the data hostage, but it's your data. And we find lots of those systems. So I'm glad you're saying that, because I think, for anyone, and I'm not saying this because, we want everyone to use SME Metrics. Obviously we would like that, but also be aware, because we're talking about private practice, also be aware of what you're using and know the fine print, because lots of these systems don't tell you that. You can't get the data out, or if you do, you have to pay, as you said, I don't know what the price was, but 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever that is. And I don't find that cool, the fact that they do that.
Yeah, because also, we're actually having an issue with them because they won't release all of our data, even though we pay for it. So our bookkeeper is busy fighting with them and saying that it's actually a SARS requirement that they release these particular invoices to us, that they don't want to. But I want to come back to what you said. I've got an uncle who's very, 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 very wealthy. Okay, like stupid wealthy. And he had a surgical supplies business that he sold for stupid money many years ago. He invested wisely. He lives the life of Riley. He's very financially successful, and I love him to pieces. Not because he's financially successful, but because he's a lovely guy. But he told me many years ago that when they had a product in their surgical supplies catalog that wasn't selling, he would double the price and it would start to sell. And this is something that I've mentored all the psychologists that come to me for supervision, the ones that come to me for groups, the ones that come to me through my training, the ones that come to me in the center, is that people don't value what they don't invest in. So one of my associates was charging less than everybody else. And I said to her, now, if somebody knows that everybody else is charging this much and you're charging 25% less, who are they going to think is the better psychologist? They're going to think the other person is the better psychologist. So charge what everybody else is charging and value your product, because your time is your product when you're a psychologist. Value your product, value your stock. And like with you guys, like you saw, when you put it up to a competitive price, people then started to value it. And I think this is such a beautiful metaphor for our relationships, is that when we feel devalued in a relationship, we actually halve our price and we actually soften our boundaries. Whereas if we want to feel valued, we actually have to be firmer about our boundaries. We actually have to increase our price, so that people get an opportunity to invest in us and thereby value us, because people do not value what they don't invest in.
Well said. But going on that same thought pattern, through doing these episodes now, the other thing that kind of came up was that when practitioners are just starting off, and you quite a seasoned, in private practice management. But when you're starting off, you don't have those funds, whether it's $500 or something. Do you think there's a value case to offering, like just say the practice management software at a lower price, that when the practitioner gets to a certain level of turnover, then the normal subscription holds? Do you think there's any value to that, that thought pattern?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like with the psychologists that are joining my practice now, there is a lower rental for them for the first few months to support them, and I'm showing that I'm investing in them so that they also feel valued. So I think that there is definitely value in that. And I think that, any of your existing clients, so if I think about my associates that are paying the full rental hearing this, they know that I've also gone above and beyond for them before. So any of your existing clients that got an issue with that, not every client is worth keeping. So if they feel that it's unfair that you're giving a newbie who's starting out a fair opportunity for success, that maybe had to do a free internship that hasn't earned for a year, that is now taking this leap into private practice. Now they've got rent, they have to buy furniture, they have to pay health professions counsel fees. And the psychologists' health professionals counsel fees are the highest out of everybody.
Oh,
We have
wow.
to pay more than specialist doctors, okay? And we're not earning as much as specialist doctors for some reason. They have to, pay BHF fees. They have to support themselves. I definitely think that as a partner, and that's one thing that I've experienced with SME Metrics, is I feel like you guys are a partner, not just a service provider, but a partner, that if you have a program like that where you're showing them that you are investing in them, that would be very attractive for them. Because people do value what they invest in. But like I said, this other product was 3 times the price. That's why I thought it was better. I had the experience that it wasn't better. So it's not always true that more expensive is better. But with these, I think what my experience is with, and I do have a lot of experience working with first-year practitioners, first-year private practice practitioners, is that they do really value support in giving them the best chance for financial success, because we know with a small business, the biggest problem is cash flow. So giving them the best chance of success, and in your relationship with them, showing that you're investing in them by believing in them, and also then give a sense of then loyalty to your product because you have helped them out in the beginning. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for reinforcing that. That's been the thought pattern, and I think we've been testing it out. On the other side of it is also to reward loyalty. So to tell clients, like if you've been with us for 3 years, and longer, we almost like cap our pricing. So we would never increase that, past a certain level, I think. But I like how you said partner. So I think that's great. and thanks for saying that, because I think that's quite useful as well, for us, but also for anyone listening to it, when they're selecting these systems. Would you have to close up? Obviously, it's amazing how quickly time flies by. But Shaz, anything that you think we should have asked Jeanie around private practice or being a clin psych?
No, I think we covered the subject quite nicely. There was 1 or 2 rabbit holes that we did manage to go down. Normally we would ask how you manage your bad debt book, but you'd already kind of covered that when you spoke about having a professional bookkeeper brought in. And I do agree with you with anything with business is spend the money and have the people to do it. And if you don't have the people to do it, make sure that you have the systems and the software to do it so that it's done properly. So thank you. I think this has been a really, really insightful hour just on how to run a successful private practice.
Thank you. If I can just say the 3 points that I really want to just emphasize to practitioners who are listening to this in terms of running a private practice, there are 3 things: finding clients, keeping clients, and ensuring that your clients pay. So finding clients in your marketing and your professional identity, keeping clients for the duration of an effective therapeutic process, so not just once-off sessions. That comes down to your skill and having good training and knowing how to manage that relationship with your clients in a professional way. And then finally, making sure that your clients pay is having something like SME Metrics, a partner like SME Metrics, to make sure that your business side of your practice is running effectively.
Thank you. I mean, even that, that's like, that's like an amazing nugget of information. And especially, I would say over and above that, especially if you're a psychologist, because you have those sessions. And I don't think I've heard many people say this, keeping clients. You can find the clients, but I find, with some psychologists as well, you get the clients, but then they don't really stay on the, like for a longer time. And if you do that well, and that's the reason you want to go to, for mentorship with people like yourself, Jeanie, or you mentioned Charles Foster. Find someone that can help you with that part, because it's going to make life so much more easier. Because you just need 30 clients, and you're going to be making 50K plus. I mean, that's
Also,
the numbers
I just
don't
want
lie.
to say, also layering your clients. So having clients that you see weekly, having clients that you see every second week, having clients you see monthly. But also when I say keeping clients, it means that when their therapy process is finished on this presenting complaint, later when something happens in their life, the first person that they want to talk to is you. So returning clients. So not just keeping them for the length of an effective therapy process. You can't do effective therapy in 1 session. You need that 12 to 18 sessions process in order to really get into it and make meaningful change, because we're in the business of change. And change doesn't happen in 1 session. Change doesn't happen in 2 sessions. But also keeping the relationship with the clients going, that later in their lives, I've got clients I've had relationships with them for 10 or 11 years. They haven't been in therapy every week for that time, but you layer in your clients. So I've got hundreds of clients but not all of them that I see every week, and keeping that relationship with them and realizing that it's a lifelong relationship in which you become part of this person's life that they either see frequently or infrequently, but they know they can always come to you and not another psychologist, to you, because you've developed that relationship with them if something happens or they want to work on something later in their life.
Well said. I love that too. I mean, I think that's exactly what it is. And I think, if you're a psychologist and you're listening to this and people are not coming back to you for therapy, then that's probably the reason. That's probably the marker for you probably to look for supervision and see why that's the case. So there's something not right. One last question. I know I'm pushing my luck. Do you have any thoughts around renting versus owning? Because I mean, obviously there's lots of, do you have any thoughts around that? Because there's lots of practitioners, obviously, that just rent space. Is there a certain transition where you actually go and buy your place or own the place? So.
I think it's really got to do with what your needs are and also what your capacity is. So I think that renting from somebody that's got experience, that has got systems in place, when you're starting out, I think is very effective when you can join part of a team. And I think that owning at a later stage or going out on your own is really when you want to extend yourself and challenge yourself professionally to start growing other professionals. But you really have to want to grow other professionals. You really have to be interested in supporting other professionals to be incredibly effective, because you do invest a lot of your time and your energy in them. But going out on your own, I think, is effective for, we've had psychologists through the practice that are very introverted, that like to work at home, that don't like to see other people, don't want to have a receptionist, want to see 3 or 4 clients a day, 3 times a week. And that's absolutely fine, being on your own. But it's actually a business decision. And you have to make sure you know what your business needs are and also what capacity you have. Are you experienced enough? Do you have the resources? Do you have the capital built up? Is it really necessary? Do you want that extra stress in your life? And are you, if you're going to own a center, are you prepared to nurture and support the professionals over and above the work that you're already doing with your clients and in running a business that, you guys know how many sessions we bill a month, hundreds of sessions that we bill, thousands of sessions that we bill, hundreds of thousands of rands that we bill every single month, that you have to also manage that business side of things. So you need to really be a little special brand of crazy to want to own. I'm just joking. You have to be ready to have a professional challenge when you feel that you have achieved everything that you can on a professional challenge level with building your own practice as a renter.
Yeah, I like that. And I was asking that question very consciously because, getting into a system like impact therapy, like I'm saying system as well, not just center, you know that you can expect certain things. When you have to build that, you're building it from scratch. And I think as soon as you go and, try to buy something or something like that, you are building it from scratch. And I think that's a key point that you have to just be aware of. Love this discussion. Love the fact that you spending the time with us and sharing all of this stuff. Thanks very much for being on the show.
Thanks, guys. It was an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it and had a great time with chatting with both of you.
Thank you very much, Jeanie, and look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thanks, Shaz.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.